Entrepreneurs solve problems for money. That's what they do. Okay. And so you've got to be in the right zone to be able to solve those problems. And, I think about this all the time. I don't learn a lot from my wins. I learn a lot from my failures. And if I can't fail fast, I get stuck in that washing machine. And then self-doubt creeps in like, when in fact, if all you did was sleep better, I can erase easily 60, 70% of that. I'm not saying I make smart people out of stupid people, right? But at the end of the day, if you're an intelligent human and you're not sleeping at the right time, you are not meeting your potential at all, like not even close.
Welcome back, everyone, to Successful with ADHD. I'm your host, Brooke Schnittman, CEO and founder of Coaching with Brooke, an award-winning, globally recognized ADHD and executive function coaching company for all ages. And today we have something a little different for you. As many of you know, I love to bring you the best content, and sometimes that means revisiting some of mine and my listeners' favorite episodes. Whether you're a longtime listener or new to our show, today's rerun is one of those must-listen moments. Originally airing in 2023, this episode features some of the most popular and needed information for ADHDers out there today. All right, without further ado, let's jump back into time and enjoy this classic episode of Successful with ADHD. Today I have Dr. Breus in the house. Thank you for being here.
Of course. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
And so many ADHDers are excited that you're here today. Sleep is the number one issue that we have to deal with. And before we get into that, I would love to just give you a little bit of time to share accolades, because you're not just any sleep doctor, you are the sleep doctor. So
I am.
So I'm going to share a little bit about what I know about Dr. Breus. For those of you who haven't heard of him, you should look him up. He is a double board certified clinical psychologist and clinical sleep specialist. He's one of the 168 psychologists in the world to have taken and passed the sleep medicine boards without going to medical school.
Yep.
Interesting. That sounds very ADHD-like of you.
Yep.
Dr. Breus is the author of 3 books, with the newest one in 2017, The Power of When. And that gives the groundbreaking biohacking of the perfect time to do everything. So he has something called chronotypes, which we're going to be talking about. And there's a test on it, and I took it. I'm a dolphin. We'll get into that. But he created this book based on your chronotype. He also gives the reader the exact time to have sex, run, eat a cheeseburger. I do love those. Buy, sell, ask your boss for a raise. So basically you make all of the decisions for us ADHDers. I get it.
I'm working hard to try.
And all of these answers come from over 200 research studies. So this isn't just like, one night.
I didn't make this stuff up.
Didn't make it up. He also has been an expert resource for most major publications, doing more than 300 interviews per year. Okay, not total, but per year. And including the famous Oprah, Dr. Oz, The Doctors, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, et cetera, et cetera. He's been in private practice for 23 years and recently relocated to Los Angeles, as he was named the top sleep doctor of LA by Reader's Digest. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. Boy, I sound impressive. I didn't know I did all those things sometimes. I keep forgetting.
Well, if you thought about it all the time, maybe you wouldn't be able to sleep. So
I know, right? Exactly.
So talk to us. You specialize and came up with the different types of chronotypes. And I'm a dolphin. My husband's a lion. Tell us what that's all about.
Sure. So first of all, I want to be super clear. I didn't come up with chronotypes. So chronotypes have been around since the 70s. And for people who don't know what the word chronotype means, you've actually heard of the concept before. If you've ever been called an early bird or a night owl, those are chronotypes. Okay. So back in the 70s, there was a cool little questionnaire that you could take called the morningness, eveningness questionnaire where some people like to get up early, some people like to stay up late. So we called them early birds and night owls. Then around kind of the mid 80s, we said, oh, well, there's people in the middle. We got to come up with a name for them. So they called them hummingbirds. I have no idea why they call them hummingbirds. It seems like a really ridiculous name, but that's what it was. And it kind of, fast forward, we got into like the mid 2000, 2010, 2015 era. And I had a patient, and one of my patients I failed with. So my area of subspecialty within sleep and sleep disorders is insomnia. And so people always ask, like, why did you take the medical boards if you're a clinical psychologist? And it's because insomnia is not just a psychological issue. It is both a medicine, anatomy, and psychology issue. And in order for me to be able to holistically treat people, I had to know both sides of the brain, basically, sure. Right? And so when you start to look at that, you realize that these insomnia patients are quite complicated. And as we were discussing, before the interview, they're kind of a pain in the ass, right? So they're hard. Most sleep specialists have no interest in working with these people. They treat sleep apnea, narcolepsy, restless legs, all important things to treat. And I want to be super clear. If you think you have a sleep disorder, talk to your doctor and get yourself sleep tested. But to be fair, if you've got insomnia, you don't want to be sleep tested because we attach 27 electrodes to you. And if you think you didn't sleep well before, I can assure you, you ain't going to sleep well again, right? And so focusing in on insomnia, I had this one patient and I failed miserably. And to be fair, I bat like, somewhere in the 500 to 600 range for insomniac. So about every 6 out of 10, I really can hit a home run with and do quite well with. But some people are just tough to work with. So I failed with her. I tried cognitive behavioral therapy. We had even tried medication, working with her physician, tried all kinds of different things. And so I was like, come back in. I need to do more. We need to get more in depth, really understand what's going on for you. And we were talking. And she finally turned to me and she said, Michael, she said, I just think I was born in the wrong time zone. I was like, okay, tell me more.
Yeah.
Tell me more. So we started talking about it and she was like, it feels like my time zones keep switching on me, like all over the place. And I was like, that's interesting. I said, well, for work, what would be your best time zone? And she said, my best time zone would be if I could show up at like 10, 11 and stay till like 7. And I was like, well, why don't you do that? And she said, well, my boss would not allow it. My children and husband would not allow it because I get up early and, help deal with the kids and all this other stuff. And I said, well, can I call your boss and ask him if we could run an experiment? Right? Because at this point, like, I'm willing to try just about anything.
Why not?
Right. Exactly. Like how much harm could it do? Right. And so I call up her boss and her boss says, we can do whatever you want. And this was on a Monday, believe it or not. He said, but on Friday, I'm firing her. And I was like, oh, crap.
Ooh.
Like no pressure. Right. So
based on the fact that she wasn't productive in the morning.
Exactly. So she was falling asleep at meetings. Her work product was unproductive, very scattered all over the place. And so I was like, okay, let's give it a go. I said, I don't want her to have to come in before 10. She's going to stay until 7. So we did a few different things and we figured out that she was what's called a dolphin. So I'll explain to you what a dolphin is in just a second. And so we were able to manipulate her schedule so that it made sense for her. And so I called him up on Friday and the first words out of his mouth were, I have 3 more employees I want you to talk to.
So did he not fire her?
He did not fire her. I worked with 3 other employees. So I called up her husband to find out what his experience was. And he said something to me that was so profound. He said, thank you for giving me my wife back. Right. It's like, it raises the hairs on your arms. Right. It was wow. Okay. Like there's something here. Right. And she's not an early bird. She's not a night owl. She's not in between. She's got anxiety. She's got like very difficult to focus, very difficult for attention, all these different things that, sounds like an ADD patient to me. Right. So I said, okay, let's work more on figuring this out. And so I wrote the book, The Power of When. So Power of When, WHEN, is when in your day you should do certain things, right? And so for her work day needed to be from 10 to 7, right? Because we were also able to identify during that slice of time when she was able to focus, when she was able to be creative, when she was hungry, when she needed to take a nap. And this was all based on research that had been done all around the world. So chronotypes, again, they've been around since the 70s. So what I did was I aggregated all of this information around, and then we decided, well, how do we identify these people, right? Like, how do we figure out who's what? And so I started to look at genetics. So I'm a bit of a sleep nerd. I like to look at all the science.
I hope you are, if that's what you do for a living.
Right, exactly. I should be for anything. And so I started to look at the genetics and got really interested in the human genome. And it turns out that being an early bird or a night owl, it's not a choice. It's in your actual DNA, right?
Okay.
So there's almost 70 different places on the human genome that have an effect on your circadian rhythm. There's one place that I decided to focus on called the PER3 area. So this area, if two genes are flip-flopped in one way, a mild mutation, you're an early bird. If they're flip-flopped another way, you're a night owl. If they're just normal, you're a hummingbird. But then there's some that are completely opposite. That's where you're a dolphin.
What test is that called?
So you actually have to get your genetics actually tested. Now, to be fair, one of the things that I do in my private practice now is I'll take a DNA swab and I will actually look at your genetics. If you do, like, for example, if you've ever done 23andMe.
Oh, I was just thinking about that. I'm like, oh my, you're going to disrupt a lot of families here.
Well, no, but here's the thing: is it's not as disruptive as you might think. It actually makes families come closer together. So there's actually a morningness, eveningness report on 23andMe that starts to get to this as a general idea.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. You just look under reports. You'll be surprised. It's right down there at the bottom. Like, what time should you be waking up? What time should you be going to bed? All, again, based on genetics.
I get emails from them all the time about possible relatives, and I just delete.
Right,
now
right.
I need to find the good stuff. I don't want to know about possible relatives.
Yeah. No interest. No, thank you. But if you can find this type of genetic information available to you, there's a lot that you can actually do with it. And so by aggregating all of these studies and figuring out when early birds are good at certain things, when night owls are good at certain things, when what we basically call non-typical chronotypes, or what I've named dolphins, things, that it works out pretty well. And so people always ask, like, well, why animals, right? So first of all, I'm not a bird, right? I'm a mammal, right? And so I didn't want to come up with another bird. So I chose animals that actually represent the circadian rhythmicity that they are. So lions are transposed for early birds, because many people might know, but lions wake up before dawn. They usually have their first kill before dawn. They're very active hunters in the early morning hours. Bears, who are people in the middle, they're now hummingbirds now are bears. They wake up as the sun comes up. They go to bed when the sun goes down. They're very kind of affable creatures, kind of working around that. Wolves are the night owls. Many people know wolves are very much night creatures, right?
Sure.
Now, people say, well, dolphins, Michael, what are you talking about with dolphins? So it's interesting. Dolphins sleep unihemispherically. So half of their brain is asleep while the other half is awake and looking for predators, right? That sounds like somebody who's got some anxiety, who's got some insomnia, who's got some of these concerns.
Sure. And that's why we wake up tired and exhausted the next day.
Exactly, right? And who doesn't want to be a dolphin, right? We also wanted animals that were aspirational, right? Like, who doesn't want to be the king or the queen of the jungle, right? Or who doesn't want to be an awesome teddy bear or a wolf, or a dolphin? So we really thought through kind of the idea of which one of these animals do you kind of want to be. So once we kind of figured that out, I was like, okay, I'm going to create a quiz for people to take online, because not everybody can do their genetics, right? And to be fair, the quiz works, but it's not like foolproof, right? I mean, there's only so much you can do with 30 questions on the internet, right?
Sure.
So it's called chronoquiz.com, and we'll put the link in the show notes afterwards so people can go and check it out. What's been fantastic is we've gotten now north of about 3.5 million people have taken the quiz. So we have tons of data to really start to understand with people. And so here's how it works. If you're a lion, which is an early bird, your melatonin stops by about 4:30 in the morning. You wake up around 5:30, 6 o'clock, and then a very predictable pattern to your hormones goes on until about 9:30 at night. If you're a bear, that's forward by about 90 minutes. If you're a wolf, that's forward by about 90 minutes. Right? And if you're a dolphin, it's all over the place, right? So it gets very, very interesting when you start to look at it from a pure hormonal standpoint. So as an example, if you're a wolf, like I used to be, my body doesn't stop producing melatonin sometimes until 8:30, 9 o'clock.
Oh, wow.
But if I got to get up at 6, guess what? I'm groggy as hell.
Sure.
I'm not productive. It doesn't work out well for me. But if I know that, I can either go to bed earlier. Well, actually, I can't, because as a wolf, your melatonin doesn't kick off until almost midnight. So what I have to do then is take a nap during the day. Right. So I can strategically place my nap during a time of day when I know I'll be tired. And you don't have to take a long nap, less than a 25-minute nap, and boom, I can be up and going whenever I need to be.
So it sounds like there's a lot of strategy behind knowing what chronotype you are. It's not the same one size fits all solution for sleep.
Not at all. Not at all. Not at all. And that's the problem. Like you hear now, like there's a big thing going around with people that they say things like, oh, I want to be part of the 5 a.m. club where I get up in the morning. Right. I'm going to tell you right now, that's total horse shit. Okay. Like there is no universe where that makes sense. Only in about roughly 15% of the people out there can do that successfully. Okay. That means 85% of people are going to fail when they try to do something like that. Like that's not a good idea.
I'm so glad you mentioned that because I also work with entrepreneurs and we shame ourselves having ADHD so often. Well, I saw this person waking up at 5 a.m. I read the 5 a.m. club, this and that. Like, should I have a morning routine where I'm reading at 5 a.m.? No, if you're going to be exhausted for the rest of your day and you need to slow roll your day and you need to sleep, that's going to be counterproductive.
Absolutely. You have to know your genetics. Like, you know, I tell people all the time, look, I'm 5'9". I'm never going to dunk a basketball. It's just not going to happen, right? I know who my body is and I work within my body to be able to do the things to the optimal performance that I want to be able to do them. That's what this is it's kind of like a secret weapon for optimal performance. And so, you know, you said to me earlier in the podcast, you said, oh, there's going to be a lot of couples or families that are going to get upset. Actually, the opposite happens. Here's what's so fascinating is not everybody in the family is going to have the same chronotype. In fact, many people, when they get married, don't marry the same chronotype. Okay. So it makes it very interesting. Right. So this is actually one of the reasons why my most popular chapter is what's the best time for sex. Right. Because a lot of people are like, what's going on here?
I am so glad you have a chapter on that.
Oh, yeah. And it's funny. It's the most quoted chapter that I have. People are always interested in it. We'll talk about it in just a second. But the basics of chronotype is you go to Chrono Quiz, you take the quiz, you figure out what you are, right? If you want, buy the book. I mean, I'd love it if you do, but you don't necessarily have to. We send emails to teach people different things like when should you have your first cup of coffee, depending upon your chronotype? When should you go to sleep? When should you stop alcohol? Things like that become very, very important strategically speaking, right? Because here's the problem is when was the last time somebody taught you how to sleep?
Never.
Almost never, right? And so, but it's one of those things that you feel like, well, nobody taught me how to breathe either. Well, by the way, there's certain ways that you can breathe that can be very effective.
Right. Mindfulness, meditation.
Exactly.
Deep belly breathing, but you have to be intentional about it.
Exactly. And so what I tell people all the time is you must be intentional about your sleep, right? And if you can create a structure by which to follow, number one, structure is great for people with ADD because
we thrive off of it, but hate it at the same time.
Absolutely. But at the end of the day, if you can follow some of my guidelines in a fairly easy format, I'm going to show you productivity gains that are massive for you in any area that you want. I'll give you a great example, a personal area, right? So a lot of people say, well, can your chronotype change over time? Actually, it does. Believe it or not, everybody goes through all of the chronotypes at some time in their life. So if you're a baby, you're a lion. You go to bed early, you wake up early, right? And when you're in like middle school, you're a bear, right? So you kind of get up at 7:30, go to bed at 7:30. When you're an adolescent, you're a wolf, right? What do? You want to stay up until 2 and sleep until 12, right? Like wolves often do. Then your chronotype seems to set for about 30 years, and then it starts to change again, right? And so if you ever turn to your parents or your grandparents and say, hey, I want to go out to dinner, what do they say? Oh, let's go to 4:30, 5 o'clock dinner. Like, why? Right? Because they're moving backwards, right? You're like, what's going on with you, grandma? It's like, they can't help it. It's all about when does your melatonin by genetics kick off, right? And so once we understand that, it becomes much, much easier to manage ourselves throughout the day.
So let me ask you a question. So
Sure.
I know you said that it changes every 30 years.
Ish,
right? So this might be a coincidence, but when I worked in a school, I had to wake up early and I was fine waking up early. I thrived waking up early and I would go to bed early. Now I still go to bed somewhat early and I wake up around the same time every day because of my baby. But also I know that I cannot be productive with work. Like don't start work until 10 a.m. For me.
So you're a classic dolphin for sure, right? So you're somebody there's a weirdness to your schedule, right? It kind of doesn't fit into the classic early bird or the classic night owl. And so what we need to do is, first of all, is regularize your wake up time. So we need to find the right wake up time for you, right? And we can do that in a whole host of ways. One is take the chrono quiz, but if you want to be even more exact about it, you can just measure your melatonin. So there are assays that you can buy online. They're like $100 and it's saliva. And you take a saliva sample in the morning, in the afternoon, the next day, morning, afternoon, and you get a very nice cortisol and melatonin curve. Then you've got to follow the data, right? You've got to see where your data is there. And then you know when to fall asleep, when to wake up. If you just drill into that, here's where it gets really interesting. So here's where the productivity is through the roof, is if you find what I call your chronotypical swim lane, right, which is your place to be, we actually find that you condense your total amount of sleep needed.
Interesting.
Which gets really interesting, right? So people tell me all the time, they're like, I wish I could find an extra 90 minutes in my day. Oh, I can find it for you. No problem. All I have to do is get you into your chronotypical swim lane. And here's what happens. It takes about 4 months, but all of a sudden your sleep begins to condense. So we used to always say, you need 8 hours, you need 8 hours. First of all, that's bullshit. You don't need 8 hours. Most people don't. Okay. There's varying amounts of time. It depends upon your age, depends upon your gender. For women, it depends upon where you are in your menstrual cycle. It depends upon if you have kids. Like there's a whole host of different things. But generally speaking, the reason you're in bed 8 hours is to basically get 6.5 to 7 hours of good solid sleep.
Interesting.
Right? But if I can tell you exactly where you can go and get that in the time frame in which you're going to be in bed, guess what? I just shaved an hour off of that time that you spent in bed. And now you can use that hour more productively for whatever you want.
Amazing.
Yeah. Now it can be for personal things. It can be for professional things. It can be for spiritual things. Like you get to decide, right? That's the cool part is you get to think about, okay, well, what do I want to do better?
Right. So we actually, if we follow your method, it's not sleep procrastination. It's actually intentional shift of your sleep schedule.
Exactly. I'm working on this article right now that I'm going to entitle Sleepy Entrepreneurs Fail Slowly. Okay.
It just stacks up over time, huh?
Exactly. Right. And as an entrepreneur, you want to fail quickly, right? Because if it ain't working, you want to know fast so you can pivot and retry and pivot and retry until you get into your lane and go, right?
Sure.
And so this is what happens is people don't realize it, but focus is affected. Attention is affected. Energy is affected. I mean, all things that you need, your diet is affected. Your ability to exercise is affected. I tell people all the time, like literally everything you do better with a good night's sleep.
Absolutely. So I know so many people, me included sometimes, that it's a catch-22, right? They're in this vicious cycle where they can't sleep. So then they're not productive the next day. Correct. And then they can't sleep and they keep trying to do all these things. What would be the first thing that you would tell someone who's in that vicious cycle?
Talk to a sleep specialist. And let me explain why. So here's the thing is this isn't something necessarily that you can do on your own. So many people are like, look, how tough can this be, Michael? I can figure all of this out by myself. I can read one of your books. I can do that. Here's what I've discovered, especially people with ADD. This is not something you are going to figure out by yourself. Okay. This is something that you will talk with somebody about. It doesn't take long, maybe 2 or 3 sessions to understand how the system really works. And then to have very defined points in time, because we got to figure out what you are, right? Which chronotype you are. Then we have to give you the timing. Then we have to see if it worked, right? Because it's a 30 questions on the internet. Like sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not so good. Right. And so we have to, and you know, everybody's a little bit individual. So we kind of manipulate it around until we get there. Once we get there and we layer it in for about 28 days, you're good to go. Now, if you turn to me and said, Michael, I'm going to put a gun to your head and I'm going to say, what's the one thing? That's easy. Wake up at the same time, 7 days a week, not 5 days a week, 7 days a week. And there's a biology reason for this. This isn't just Michael causing torture right across the universe here. So what happens is when you wake up in the morning, when sunlight hits your eye, you have a very specific cell in your eye called a melanopsin cell. This sends a signal to your brain to turn off the melatonin faucet in your head. Okay. Once that melatonin faucet turns off, brain fog starts to clear, everything gets sharper, and you're doing much, much better. For example, we use light therapy for jet lag. we can use light and manipulate light. Let's be fair, light is medicine. People don't realize it, but it really is.
Right.
And we can do a lot with it. But there's a second thing that happens that many people don't know about is your brain sets a timer for approximately 14 hours later for melatonin to start. So here's where it gets interesting. Your brain can't tell time. Now, let me explain what I mean by that. So if you're waking up, let's make the math simple. If you're waking up at 6 a.m., 5 days a week, 14 hours later is 8 p.m., melatonin starts, it takes about 90 minutes to kick in. You get tired around 9:30, 10 o'clock, you fall asleep. But if on Saturday, you decide to sleep until 8, 14 hours later is not 8 o'clock at night. It's 10 o'clock at night because it's a timer, not a clock. And now all of a sudden your whole melatonin curve is shifted. It literally takes one night to shift your melatonin curve. It's what we call social jet lag.
Wow.
So if you think about it, you stay up late on Friday, sleep in on Saturday, stay up late on Saturday, sleep in on Sunday. Monday sucks because your melatonin curve is off.
And how long does it take to recover from that?
Not long at all. But here's the thing is you have to have the right timing based on your chronotype. Okay. So, and here's where the problem comes in. Michael, my boss says, I have to be available at 7:30 every single morning, right? So what I do is exactly what I did with my patient that I told you about before, is I turn to a lot of people and I say, ask your boss if you can run an experiment for a week, just a week, to see if your work product changes, to see if it works better for you. You will be surprised. The smart bosses out there will be very interested in saying, okay, I can get more out of this person if I'm moving more towards their personal timing and whatever their job, description is, especially with creatives. If you're out there and you're a creative person, let me tell you something. 7 a.m. sucks for creative people. It's awful. Most of my creatives are wolves. They're evening people, right? Because that's really what entrepreneurship is all about. Like my friend Joe Polish says this all the time. He says, entrepreneurs solve problems for money. That's what they do. Okay. And so you've got to be in the right zone to be able to solve those problems. And, I think about this all the time. I don't learn a lot from my wins. I learn a lot from my failures, right? And if I can't fail fast, I get stuck in that washing machine, and then self-doubt creeps in like, oh, I've been failing and failing. And because I'm not failing fast enough to be able to pivot to find that right answer to now be able to do the things that I want to do to solve said problem.
Absolutely. If you're failing slowly, you get that negative message over and over again, for sure.
It's awful,
Yes.
And then you get those negative tapes running in your head like, oh, you're never going to figure this out.
Here it is
You're
again.
an idiot, right?
Exactly.
All this stuff. And when in fact, if all you did was sleep better, I can erase easily 60, 70% of that.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I make smart people out of stupid people because that, dumb is dumb, right? But at the end of the day, if you're an intelligent human and you're not sleeping at the right time, you are not meeting your potential at all, like not even close.
Interesting. And in my upcoming book, I also talk about like optimal focus time. I would love for you to review that section and put your chronotypes in there because how do people know their optimal focus time unless they
know your chronotype?
Exactly. Yeah. So question for you. I know you said that a lot of individuals with ADHD are dolphins.
Yes. Not all.
So is it a thing that a lot of ADHDers have reverse sleep cycles or delayed sleep cycles?
So it's all over the board. That's what's so fascinating to me. So like when we were talking earlier, sometimes what I find is with a dolphin, if I can, in fact, find out what their sleep schedule is and get them working better with that and lower some of that anxiety, because quite frankly, the biggest thing that most of my dolphins suffer from is a level of anxiety, right? It's a fear-based situation that's kind of going on. Like, I'm not good enough. I can't solve this problem, or shit, I'm not doing it right.
And then we have those vivid dreams and nightmares and
absolutely. So all of that kind of comes into play. If we can get a handle on that, sometimes their true chronotype pops up. Sometimes they end up being a lion, which is an early person who gets stuff done and all that kind of operational stuff that they're looking for. Sometimes my dolphins turn out to be night owls, but they're being forced into an early schedule, right? So their boss is saying, you've got to be up at 7 o'clock in the morning, when historically, like, they never took a class in college before noon, right? right? Because that wasn't their thing. Like they could never quite get there, that sort of stuff.
Can we differentiate real quick? So if you're forced to
Mm-hmm.
have a certain cycle, whether it be for kids or an environment, a work environment where they can't, unfortunately, change your work schedule.
Right. Happens all the time.
Can you adapt 100% to that, or is there always going to be some sort of delay?
So yes and no. And so there's always a little bit of a delay, but we have tricks to help people with that. So one of my favorite tricks is a nap, right? And so I call it the escape hatch, right? And so sometimes for my dolphins, it's like I have to be up, at a time when my body doesn't want to be up, or I have to be asleep when a time when my body doesn't want to be asleep. How do I deal with something like this? And I'm exhausted during the daytime. I'm only getting 5.5 to 6 hours of sleep. My body really needs 7. Again, this can vary across people. In women in particular, with women, it takes a little bit longer because I also have them map their menstrual cycle with their sleep diary. Because a lot of women need more sleep before their period and less sleep after their period. And so we can manipulate that and understand where that works. But a nap between 1 and 3 in the afternoon for about less than 25 minutes can be a killer productivity boost. There's a couple things you think about. So number one is safety at all times, right? So let somebody know that you're taking a nap in a safe place because, you're very vulnerable. Your eyes are closed. You don't know what's going on. Don't go to your car, right? And if you are going to go to your car to take a nap, have somebody sitting in the seat next to you, listening to a podcast or doing whatever, eating their lunch, whatever.
Where they're safe. Again,
safety, safety, safety. Because here's the thing that a lot of people don't realize. You can't sleep unless you're safe. Like, period, stop everything.
Yeah, it's the basic hierarchy of needs, right?
Exactly. The root of all insomnia is safety, 100%, every time. Okay. And so if you can find a safe place, and a safe place, by the way, isn't necessarily just your physical surroundings. It's also your mental surroundings. It's also your spiritual surroundings, right? And so if all you do is think about all your failures all day long, that is not a safe place for your brain to be.
And do you think that's why many individuals with ADHD have a difficult time sleeping because of that negativity bias?
Absolutely. No question about it in my mind. And so when I look at sleep, there's a few things that I look at, but 2 main categories that I work with them on is there's discipline, things like stop caffeine by 2 p.m., learn when to take a nap, figure out your chronotype, wake up at the same time every day, basic stuff. And then there's acceptance, right? It's okay. Like the newsflash, your head's not going to pop off if you don't get a great night's sleep tonight. It's happened to you a million times before, right? And so oftentimes there, and this is going to sound a little hokey, but I use it all the time, is the serenity prayer, right? So grant me the acceptance to understand the things I know, understand things I don't know, and accept the things I can't do anything about.
Right.
Right. And once you understand how to accept your situation, your anxiety drops, which allows the natural sleep process to take over. Because nobody in the history of time has ever thought their way to sleep. Nobody, right? So people tell me all the time, I wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning and I start thinking. And then I figure, I'm just going to finish out that thought, or I'm going to burn this new idea into my brain or whatever. Stop it, okay? It's not going to work, right? Accept the fact that your body's up and it's okay. A lot of times ADDers, they compare themselves to other people around
all
them.
the time.
Whether it's somebody else with ADD or somebody else that doesn't have it. And it's constantly this comparison. Like, shut up, stop it. But here's the thing is ADD is a superpower. Like people don't get it. Okay. But if you can harness it, you can solve all kinds of problems that most people have no idea how to solve.
Why do you think that I polled Instagram and our email list, and I got so many people who are interested in knowing why their children are having such difficulty sleeping. They try melatonin, clonidine.
Bad idea. Okay. So there's a lot going on with kids and sleep. So number one, it depends upon the age of the child. So I want to be super clear about something. If your child has a sleep problem and you give them a pill, they now have 2 problems. They have a sleep problem, they have a pill problem. Okay. 99% of children do not need a pill to sleep. Okay. Now I want to be clear. There's some that do, right? If you've got a child who had a major psychotic episode or a mental breakdown or has been in rehab or what have you, many of those children need a pill to sleep based on their neurochemistry and things like that. I'm not saying go against your doctor. If your doctor gives them a pill for a particular reason at a particular time to sleep, then you need to listen to your doctor. But there's a lot of parents out there who pass out melatonin. And unfortunately, some of their doctors tell them to do it. 95% of children make 4 times the amount of melatonin that they need. 4 times. Okay.
Wow.
You do not need to do that. Also, many people don't know this, but melatonin is by prescription only in most places other than the United States. That's number one. Number two, they're overdosing these children wildly. The appropriate dose for an adult is between 0.5 and 1.5 milligrams. You can't find it for that. The only thing you can find is 3 milligram gummies, 5 milligram gummies, 10 milligram gummies, right? It's stupid. And by the way, most people don't know this part. Melatonin is a contraceptive at high levels. A contraceptive. Can you think of anything worse for a young female developing body than introducing a contraceptive when it's not necessary? No. I can't. Sounds like a bad idea to me.
Wow.
So you got to think through this as an idea. Now, to be fair, there is some data on ADD and melatonin, and it can be helpful. But test your freaking melatonin. Like, figure out if you need it or not. Don't just willy-nilly start using it, right? Talk to a doctor and see if you can figure out what makes sense there. Okay. Sure. And by the way, vitamin D is also a circadian pacemaker. And there's a lot of data coming out about vitamin D and ADD and how useful it can be, right? You want to take vitamin D in the morning. You want to talk with your doctor, but somewhere between 5,000 and 8,000 international units per pill is usually a good place to start. You want to have it with a little bit of food because it's fat soluble. You don't want to just basically pee it out. So there's a lot of things that you can do ahead of time before you get to the melatonins of the world. But here's the biggest problem with kids and sleep is their parents. 99% of the time, the parents are like, I want you to go to bed. And the kid doesn't want to go to bed. Why? Because you've been roughhousing with them because you were working till 7 o'clock at night. You come home, everybody has dinner at 8, and then you want to spend time because you want to be a good parent. And now it's 9:30 and you've been playing with your kids till 9:30 and they're all zapped up.
Right.
Don't be an idiot. Kids have a different schedule. Like, cut it out. It's just not that hard.
I get it. My 16-month-old, whenever we're, playing music right before bed, she's hyped until 8:30.
Right. Cut it out. Yeah. Like it, or change the music. Change it to something that's more calm, or have a little bit of music and then move into story time, or move into bath, then move into story time, then move into, dim. And by the way, the lights should be dim when you're doing all of this because you don't want excess light because that slows the production of melatonin for the child. So I'm telling people all the things that they probably already know, but to be fair, you need to give yourself some runway to land the plane. Okay. Like that's what I tell people all the time, especially with children, because children, they're different little creatures. They're not just little humans. They're not just little adults. Like they have very different schedules, right? And especially ones that are your age, they're lions. They want to go to bed early and they want to wake up early.
Yep.
Don't be rocking out at 7 o'clock at night. Okay. Like it's not a good idea. Here's the thing. And it's like, toothpaste out of a tube. It's really hard to put it back in. Right. And so you gotta give them structure, right? The more defined structure that a child has for bedtime, the better they will sleep, right? And so I tell this to people all the time, like if grandma and grandpa are showing up and their plane is late and they don't get in until 8 o'clock, they don't get to see the baby, period. Stop, full stop. We're on a schedule. That's how it works. People will give moms all this trouble all the time. Oh, I can't believe you're doing it this way. I never had to do it this way with you. Great. This isn't your child. This is my child. And it's different genetics than I had. I've got a husband or a partner who has influenced this orb with different genetics. So guess what? Shut up, right? This is how we do it here.
Exactly. This is our house, boundaries. Real quick, just 2 quick questions. So you had mentioned that don't overthink sleep. Some people don't need 8 hours of sleep. But what if someone's on a 4-hour, 5-hour consistent sleep schedule and there's nothing they can do about it? Is that okay?
There's always something they can do about it.
Okay.
So there is no universe where 4 hours, it makes sense for anyone. The lower level limit for you to be functional, to drive a car, make decisions is probably 6 hours, I would say, right? Because the data is super consistent. The more sleep deprived you are, the worse decisions that you make, the less focus that you have, the riskier decisions that you make, right? It's just a disaster. So, I love it when people are like, oh, Michael, I can only get 4 hours. Bullshit. Okay. I'm here to tell you, I know you can, I know it. Like, I know you can get more sleep. You just have to prioritize it.
Why is it so difficult? And maybe this is more complex, but why is it so difficult the older you get to take naps? I've found that a lot of people have said that they can't take naps anymore.
Well, that's a good sign. If you can't take a nap, that can be a good sign because it means you're fairly well rested. The other big thing is how caffeinated are you, right? So how much caffeine is in your system?
Are you buzzing or not?
Has a lot to do with your napping, right? And so people don't realize that caffeine has a half-life of between 6 and 8 hours. Okay, so if you don't stop caffeine by like noon, like, yeah, it's not going to go well if you try to take a nap at, 3 o'clock, right? Also, your sleep drive is directly related to the last time that you were asleep. So as an example, if you want to go to bed at 10 and you took a nap at 3, you ain't going to bed at 10. I can assure you, right? Because that sleep drive has to build up throughout the day. The biology of it is that when a cell eats a piece of glucose, something comes out the back end. One of those things is called adenosine. Adenosine works its way through your system, goes to a very specific receptor site, and then has to accumulate. When you take a nap, you lower your adenosine, which means it's harder to fall asleep. So strategically placing naps based on your chronotype works very well.
Love it. I love it. So any last closing thoughts for someone looking for a sleep change?
Absolutely. So I got a 5-step plan. Works really well. And then I also want to talk about mattresses because that's an important thing that a lot of people don't think about.
How do you pick the 14 best mattresses?
I'm gonna show you. So step number 1 is to find one wake up time based on your chronotype. Okay. Step number 2 is to stop caffeine by 2 p.m., right? As a start. Step number 3 is to stop alcohol 3 hours before bed, limiting yourself to 2 drinks. Okay. Step number 4 is to exercise daily, which is, by the way, the best way to improve sleep quality and make yourself a little bit more tired. But you need to stop usually about 4 hours before bed. And step number 5 is when you wake up in the morning, I want you to do this thing that I call the 3:15s. So you swing your legs over and you put your feet on the ground, still sitting on the bed. Take 15 deep breaths. This is merely to bring yourself centered. This is to get your respiratory system kind of back in gear. Then you drink 15 ounces of water. Most people don't know this, but sleep in and of itself is a dehydrative event. You lose almost a full liter of water from the humidity that's going on in your breath. So you've got to hydrate well before you caffeinate. And then go over to the window, or best, go outside and get 15 minutes of sunlight.
I love that.
That's just enough time to get vitamin D, and it turns off that melatonin faucet.
I love that. It's so simple. 15, 15, 15.
I believe that sleep is a performance activity. Okay. So I used to be a runner. So if you're a runner, you can run a race in flip-flops, torn shorts, with a boombox on your arm, but your time's not going to be too good, right? But if you've got your Asics on and your dry fit wear and your good tunes, your performance is going to be better, right? Sleep is the exact same way, right? And a mattress is arguably the key component in your overall sleep system. So number 1, replace your pillows about every 18 to 24 months. Most people don't think about it. Oh, yes, absolutely. They structurally break down. Your head weighs somewhere between 8 and 10 pounds, depending on how big you are. So the structure of the pillow itself is going to change. Now, if you got one of those memory foam pillows, it's like a big block of cheese, that you can probably keep that one for more like 3 years. But generally speaking, I don't like those. They sleep hot. It's not necessarily a really good thing. So replace your pillows. That's number 1. But number 2, if you've had a mattress for longer than about 6-7 years, it's probably time for a new one. But listen to your body, right? If you wake up stiff and sore more than 2 days a week, and it's not from working out really hard or hitting the mountain bike or hiking on a trail, dude, you need a new bed. So what I've done over at thesleepdoctor.com, which is my website, is we have mattress reviews. So, and it's complicated. We've reviewed over 150 beds. And so we figured out like what beds are good for side sleepers versus back sleepers versus stomach sleepers. We have mattresses that are good for people who sleep hot. We've got mattresses that are good for people who are a little bit on the bigger side of things. And so there's a lot of different things out there. Don't try to do it yourself. Trust me, it's taken years to do these reviews and figure all this stuff out. Go over there. You'll see that we've got a lot of information there on mattresses, but also we've got a lot of information about sleep in general. If you think you've got sleep apnea, you can order your own sleep test from over there and be able to figure something like that out. If you just want to learn about these kind of tips and tricks that I tell people all the time, we have lots of articles on that. And so it's a really good resource for people to check out and learn. We've actually got entire articles on sleep and ADD and ADHD, just focusing on that. So we really try to give the breadth of information out there for folks, because sleep is I can tell people this all the time. You change your sleep, you change your life. Like, it's just literally that simple. So, why not? I mean, you're spending arguably more time doing that than any other single activity that you're going to do in a 24-hour cycle. You might as well do it right.
Yeah. Sleep impacts everything.
Yeah.
Mic drop.
Exactly.
Well, thank you for your time, Dr. Breus. And
Sure.
we'll definitely put your links in the show notes. We look forward to this coming out and everyone hearing your amazing tips.
Absolutely. Happy to do it. And for folks out there, remember, the book is called The Power of When. And if you don't get the book, go take the quiz, chronoquiz.com. You will definitely learn something before it's all said and done.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Successful with ADHD. I hope it helps you on your journey. And if you need any additional support for you or a loved one with ADHD, feel free to reach out to us at coachingwithbrooke.com and all social media platforms at Coaching with Brooke. And remember, it's Brooke with an E. Thanks again for listening. See you next time.